you already have some experience with chroma keying, you might have learned that usually we degrain the plate before the alpha process and you don't touch the RGB image. If you work this way, you need to match the grain of your background plate with the foreground plate before merging them together. But I personally prefer to degrain the plate before doing any processes. Like this, I work with the degrain image in my whole comp, merge it over the background plate, and only after that I regrain everything together. In my experience, I usually got better result when I worked this way. And this doesn't apply only for chroma keying, I would say that it's a rule of thumb for any type of jobs. Let me show you a quick example. Here, let's say that we need to remove the eye of the character. The first idea that we might have is to use the clone tool to clone the skin here and put it there. Let's try that to see if it works. As you can see here, it doesn't work very well because the skin has too much variation in light and texture. But if we take a look a little bit closer, we see that if we use this technique, we save the grain. Despite of that, I don't think that this would be the right method. Let's try something else. What I can try to do is to blend everything together. In the Roto Paint node, we have the smear and the blur tool. Maybe those can help. Before blurring this zone, I would like to get rid of this specular light here, and this one also. You may have noticed that here it's a bright area in comparison with this darker one. There is a nice feature with the smear tool that allows us to smear only dark or bright areas. If I select the smear tool, you see that by default the operation is on over. With that, I'm gonna smear all the pixels and the result will look like this. Here I can still see the bright areas because I've smeared all the pixels. Let me delete this and show you another operation. The ones that are gonna be useful are the max and the min. The min will smear only the darker areas and the max only the brighter. So because here I'm gonna need to smear only the darker areas, I'm gonna use the min. This time, my specular light is gone. Now I can use the blur tool and see if I can blend this area. Even if this time I think that this is going in the right direction, I don't need to go further for you to see that it doesn't work. We have indeed blended the area, but we have also destroyed our image because now the grain is gone. I know that my example seems a little bit exaggerated, but this is typically the kind of problem you might face if you work on a plate that it's not degrained. Let me redo this exact same job, but degraining the plate first. If you have the possibility to use it, I would strongly recommend you to use the Neat Video Denoiser. In my experience, this is the best denoiser that you can find. You already know that the link will be in the description. Unfortunately, I don't have it, so here I'm gonna use the regular Nuke denoiser. You might be worried because I put the denoise amount on 3 and this may cause some loss of details. But you shouldn't be worried because as soon as we bring back the original grain over our final comp, all the details will be back. Now, if I subtract my original plate by the degrained one, I shall extract the original grain. There you go. Now, if I plus this grain over my degrained plate, I will be back on my original plate. As you can see, my result here is wrong. This is because my inputs are inverted. You can invert the inputs by pressing Shift and X. This time the result is the one that I was expecting. Now we can compare our final result with our original grain and see if we have lost something. As you can see, they are perfectly identical. Even if I sample a pixel, you'll see that they are exactly the same. Take a look here. You see, they are perfectly the same. You can even imagine blurring a little bit your image right after the denoiser. If you do it this way, your image will stay the same. Let me show you. In order to make this work, it's important to do it before the minus. Like this, the blur will be taken in account when you extract the grain. I'll blur it a little bit until this grain here will disappear. Like this. If we compare once again our before and after, you'll see that they are still the same. And if again I sample a pixel, here, still the same. Now that we are ready, we can bring back the job that we have done a little bit earlier. This time it's important to put it after the minus because I don't want that those changes are taken in account when extracting the grain. I'll copy the previous rotopaint and put it here. Now we have this little problem here. If we look at our rotopaint, we can see that the eye is effectively gone. And beside of that, now that our image is fully blurred, our blend works better. So how come our eye is back in our final result? This is because we didn't remove it in the grain. But if we take a look here, you can see that now it's gonna be way easier to clone this part here and put it there. So let's do it to fix our image. Now the problem is solved and our job is correctly done. Let's compare one last time our before and after. As you can see, we managed to remove the eye and save the grain with an easy method. That's why I recommend to always work with degrain plates and regrain the final result with the original grain. Now that this is clear, let me show you how this methodology can be very helpful when it comes to green screen. Like I said in the beginning of this chapter, if you don't touch your RGB image, I mean if you don't degrain it, you're gonna need to match the grain on your background. Which is too bad because we could use all this grain here that we see in the green screen. And this would be nothing more than the perfect match. So this is the exact purpose of this method. Reuse this grain to put it on the background. And it works usually very well when we just have the green screen. But as you might expecting, we will face some problem when we have trackers or other stuff like the C-stand here. Give me a few seconds to remove all of this and show you how we can solve those problems. Alright, this will be enough. Now if I put back the original grain over this, we're gonna have the same problem that we had with the eye just before. Because the trackers and the C-stands are still visible in the grain, they will be visible in the green screen as well. Let me quickly create a grade to show you a little bit better. You see here, it's clearly visible. So if you put this grain over your background, it obviously won't work. So to solve this problem, I could do exactly the same that I've done for the eye. Come here in the grain and clone a part here to put it here. I can also use the shape. And by the way, when you clone grain like this, you might have problems with the filtering. Here is not obvious, but if this happened, in the filter, put impulse. Like this, your image won't be filtered and you will get a better result. So now if I come back to my final result, I can say that I've solved a bit of the problem. But if I have to do that for every element that reappears in the image, it's gonna take forever, and this method it's not very efficient. So this is the moment that I have to talk about the best regrain tool I've ever seen. Of course, I'm talking about dasgrain. If there was only one gizmo that you should download from Nukepedia, this would be the one. If you go down here, you have a link to a video that explains how it works. And at this stage, I don't think I have to remind you that you will find the link in the description. Unfortunately, and this is the saddest information you will receive in the whole course, dasgrain doesn't work very well with the non-commercial version. This is mainly due because of two things. The Analyze button here, that is, let's say, the heart of the gizmo, uses Python code, and in the non-commercial version of Nuke, Python is limited. And the second thing is coming from my favorite feature, the scatter option. In order to work correctly, it uses a Blink script to create a Voronoi pattern. And in Nuke non-commercial, Blink scripts don't work. So the sad news is that we can't use dasgrain at its full potential. But the good news is that we can still use the scatter by doing a little trick to bypass the Blink script. If you open the gizmo, by pressing on the S here, we can find the scatter group. Open this group, once again by pressing on the S, and here you'll find the Blink script. This is the Blink script that doesn't work. So we're gonna remove it. And instead, we're gonna create an input node. Rename it by pressing N and call it Voronoi. Plug the input B of the copy node and copy this input. Now we can go back in the previous group. Here, you see that now we have a new input called Voronoi. Paste the input that we have copied and plug this input to it. Now if we go back to our node graph, here on the left we should have a new input. So first you have the external grain, and then we have the Voronoi. Now the trick is to generate this Voronoi pattern. And for that, I might have found exactly what we need. In this website, you can automatically generate Voronoi patterns. You just have to set the size of your image and the number of the shapes that you need. In my case, it's a 4K image. And I'll need 500 shapes. Click on Generate, and then on the right here, click on Colorize. You can show the image with the right click and save this. If I come back here inside my gizmo, this is what I get without the Voronoi pattern. Let's see how it looks like when we add the pattern that we just have generated. To show you if it works, let me put the checkerboard here in the external grain input. To see it in the output, open the dasgrain properties, go to Replace, and check this Use External Grain. Then in the output, select Normalized Grain. Now let me unplug the Voronoi so you see what happened. I'm gonna move the sample box here in the middle and activate the scatter. At the moment we don't have randomness in the repetition, but as soon as I plug the Voronoi pattern, This should be now correct. I'm not sure if this is 100% correct, but at least for the moment it seems to work. There is still a little problem that we need to solve. The scatter works in the normalized grain, this one, in the adapted grain, and also in the regrained comp. We don't see anything at the moment because nothing is plugged yet. But in order to work properly, the normalized grain and the adapted grain needs the response curve here that is generated once we analyze the image. But as I said before, this doesn't work because it's Python code and Python is limited in the non-commercial version. Let me show you first the problem. So I'm gonna plug the comp here. The plate, it's the original plate, so it's this one. And the degrain, it's this one here, with the denoiser. Now I just need to uncheck the external grain and uncheck the scatter. Let's see the outputs. Here it's the original grain. So this, it's the same as this. See? Now we have the normalized grain. And as you can see here, the result is kind of weird. And the adapted grain is also not correct. Or at least I'm not sure it is. Now if I want to scatter this part all over my image, I'm gonna need to move the sample box here. And then activate the scatter. Here you can see that it works in the normalized grain. It works in the adapted grain, but it doesn't work in the original grain. So because I'm not sure that the normalized and the adapted grain are correct because we can't analyze the image, I prefer to go inside of dasgrain and disconnect them here. The normalized grain, I disconnect it like that. And here, the adapted grain. Like this, the normalized grain and the adapted grain output the same grain as the original. And now the scatter works on the original grain. So let's see how it looks with the regrained comp. Now, thanks to the scatter, all the trackers and the C-stands have disappeared from the grain. Take a look at the before and after. But if we do it like that, we're gonna change the grain over our character, and this is not what we want to do. Let's compare with our original image. You see, the grain is different, so we need to protect this part with a mask. Because this is a green screen, I will do a quick key light. Now I can plug this mask in this input here. And tell the scatter to use the mask. Here we need to invert it. And now if we compare this with the original plate, the grain is correct. Let's take a look at the final image. As you can see now, we don't have the unwanted part in the grain anymore. And our original grain here, it's correct. There is something very important that I forgot to mention, and this is because I was doing my explanation on a still image. If we stop where we are with the modifications, we're gonna have a little problem. Take a look by yourself. As you can see, the scattered grain is frozen. This is because when we are sampling the grain, it's sampled at the current frame and not over time. If we go back inside the dasgrain gizmo, here we have a frame hold, and this is updated at the current frame every time we move the sample box. Let me quickly show you. If I go, for example, at frame 150 and then move the sample box, you see that now the frame has been updated. You can also see that this and this are linked together. So we can solve this problem in two different ways. The easiest one would be to simply disable this node, or you can put one here. Like this, the sample box will not only sample the grain in this area, but it will also sample it through time. The problem if we do it this way is that if there is any changes in the sample box area, those will be replicated all over the image. For example, if I put the sample box close to the lamp here, look what happens. As you can see, the lamp is replicated all over the image. So if you want to do it like this, you need to be sure that nothing is changing where you put the sampling box. The second method requires a little bit more preparation, but it works way better. If we come back on this website, you can see that every time I click on generate, a new pattern is created. So the first thing we need to do is to generate and save some of those patterns, and don't forget to colorize them before saving. Before I continue, I need to put back the increment at 0, because here we need that the sample holds still. I have created 4 different patterns here. The idea is to append them together and create a loop. This way, we're gonna have a different pattern on each frame. Select them in the right order, so it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and create an append clip node. As you can see, they are plugged in the same order I have selected them, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had done the opposite, this would have been the result. You see that now, because I've started from here, they are plugged in this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me bring back the other order. Now if we go at frame 1 by pressing Alt-G, we have 4 frames. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. But after that, the image is frozen. And before as well. So with the help of a time clip node, we're gonna select this 4 frame and make them loop forever. So here what we want is from frame 1 to frame 4. This is correct. But what we need is to loop before and loop after. Now if I press play, I will have an infinite loop. The problem is that we are using only 4 frames, and like this we can easily spot the loop. Let me show you a little trick to increase the number of frames just by using the same 4 patterns. I'm gonna delete this first, and I'm gonna create a mirror node. Go to frame 1 and set a keyframe here for the vertical and here for the horizontal. Now move 1 frame and check the vertical checkbox and set a keyframe on the horizontal. Once again move 1 frame and check the horizontal, set a keyframe on the vertical, again 1 frame, uncheck the vertical and set a key on the horizontal, and finally move 1 more frame, set a key on the vertical, uncheck the horizontal. Now with the same pattern, we have created 5 different variations. Well, to be honest, it's 4, but because the last frame is the same as the first frame, it's like we have 5. Take a look. This is our first one, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And after that, it's frozen. So now we just have to copy the mirror to each pattern, redo the happen and the time clip, and then we're gonna have 20 frames to loop instead of just 4. If we take a look at our result here, we have a little problem. Normally we should have 20 frames, but if I scroll through the frames, you'll see that we don't have it. You see that at frame 8, it's freezing. We can solve this problem by putting a time clip after each mirror and tell Nuke that we have 5 frames. Let me quickly do that. So what I'm doing now, it's telling you that we have a frame range from 1 to 5, and what is before and after those frames, it's black. Let's see if I'm right. Here I'm at frame 1, and before it's black, so it's correct. Now I have frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and after this one it should be black again. And it's correct. Now I can copy paste this time clip to the other mirror and redo everything that I've done. This time, the time clip has recognized that we have 20 frames instead of 4. And if I scroll through the frames, it should be correct. Before it was freezing after frame 8, but now it continues. So that means that we have solved the problem. So now we just need to tell the time clip to loop everything, and that's it. Let's see the result. This time it's looping only after frame 20, so it's almost 1 second. Like this is way harder to spot the loop and way easier to trick the eyes. A cool thing that we can do is to group everything here and just leave 4 inputs. Like this we can change the patterns the way we like. They can be bigger in size or have more shapes, and we won't have to redo all of this. To create a group, select all the nodes and press Ctrl G. For now, you can just press OK. Now double click on the group and click on the little S here. Take the output and put it here. And now we can rename our inputs. At the moment, as you can see, is just named 1, 2, 3, 4. This is because everything that is written input is ignored. For example, if I rename this input just input, the arrow won't have a name anymore. You see, the number 1 here had disappeared. So if you want to display the name input on your arrow, you have to call the input input. Like this. And now, as you can see, I'm displaying the name input over my arrow. So I'm gonna quickly rename my inputs the way I like. I'm gonna call it VP for Voronoi pattern. Now that I'm happy with my inputs, I'm gonna rename my group. I'm gonna call it Voronoi loop, but of course you can call it the way you like. And now I can save it in my toolset. I'm gonna just copy the name. And to create a new toolset, select the nodes that you want. It can be 1 or several. Come here and click on Create. If you want to create a new group or folder, put your name here and add a slash. Then put the name of your new tool and click on Create. Now if we come here, you see that I have a new group, it's the group 1, and I have my new tool. If I click on it, a new one is created. But even better, we can call it this way. Press tab, type the name, and it's here. So from now, anytime I need to create this, I just have to import some Voronoi patterns and call my new tool. Here I just plug the input, and if I play, it works. Now we are ready to solve our grain problem. As a reminder, this is where we are. The grain is still frozen, but as soon as I plug my Voronoi loop, you see that now the grain moves. And if I move the sampling box, even if the background changes, it won't be scattered, because it will depend on the frame from which I'm sampling. For example, if I want to sample at frame 130 this area, like this, you see that now I'm sampling this frame. If I go on the frame 165, this part now is not taken in account. Let me press play. This time, when the lamp hits the box, it's not scattered, and the grain now is correct. Preparing this Voronoi loop took a little bit of time, I admit, but it was worthy because now the scatter works like a charm. There is one last thing that I want to talk about that is specific to green screen. This is the green spill. Because we are extracting the grain from the source plate as it is before doing any processes, we didn't despill it yet. Let me show you what happens if I add this grain over my final comp. As you can see, we bring back some green spill here and there, and especially in the hairs. If I turn it on and off, it's more obvious. Pay attention here. So we just need to despill the grain before we add it back to our final comp. For that, I'm gonna use the key light and put one in the green. But we can't stop at this stage. If we take a look at our green channel, as you can see here, we have lost a lot of information. We need to bring back the luminance. For that, I'm gonna do the same as what we have done here. So I can copy paste this to reuse it here. Now our green channel looks way better. Without the luminance, it was like that. And now it's way better. And the final result looks like that. This is now, and before it was like that. With the compression of the screen capture, it's not very obvious, but I can tell you this makes a huge difference. The very last thing that needs to be done is to remove the trackers from the grain. Here, they are still visible. Even if in the final result it's not very obvious, be careful with that, because sometimes you are working on the still image like I'm doing right now. It's not very obvious, so you don't pay attention to it, and then after a long render you discover that they are appearing in the movement. So when you have the opportunity, it's always better to do a clean job since the beginning, so you avoid further problems. Here, to finish the job, I won't use dasgrain with the little trick that I've shown you before. Instead, I'm gonna use a gizmo that I've created in which I managed to extract the Voronoi scatter from dasgrain thanks to the help of Fabian Holz himself, the creator of dasgrain, who helped me to achieve this job. For that, I won't need this. I just need that. Unfortunately, I can't share it with you because I did it with the non-commercial version and it's encrypted. But I might do a bonus video in which I will show you how I did it. So here with that, what I can do is scatter my background. I'm gonna maybe choose something here and enable. And now it should be okay. Let's just compare it with the original footage. The grain seems okay. The dispel should be okay. Of course, this still need a lot of job to be completely done, but for the moment, I think we already have a pretty good result. If you remember at the end of the chapter number 3, I was talking about the advantage of having a uniform background when you work on several shots. Now that we are done with this shot here, let's see what happens if I plug different shots at this exact same pipe. This is our original shot, but I also have another one from another angle. As you can see, the background is a little bit different. It's way darker here, and we can see some kind of folds here. I have also a third shot that is in a completely different set. In this one, the color of the green screen is even different. It's more yellow. Those differences are already enough to make all this job fails. That's why I prepare all this shot to give them the exact same uniform background. As you can see now, they have the exact same color. So let's see how it does look at the end of the comp. So this one, we already know it. What about the second one? If we take a look at the hairs and compare with the original one, we're gonna see that the key is already very good. In this one, we can see that we have a little problem here, but this will be an easy fix. Let's see the other one. Once again, here all the hairs have been preserved. And even if the green screen was in a slightly different color, we can see that the key is already pretty good. I wanted to show you those 3 shots to illustrate what I was talking about. And I hope that I will convince you that taking the time to prepare your shot before keying them is not really a waste of time. Don't forget the tortoise strategy. I finally finished the shot. With a bit more time and effort, it could be even better, but for the moment, I think it's already pretty good. Before I press play, let me just show you how my comp looks like. To get to this result, I simply applied all the principles that we have seen since the very first class. And now, the moment of truth. For the light that seems to go on and off in the background, I simply use a curve tool and analyze this area here. Let me also show you how my alpha looks like. If you pay attention here, my alpha is flickering a little bit. This can be solved if I put a little bit more effort, but for now, if we compare with the final image, I think it's pretty okay. Alright, this is it. I admit that this class has been very long, but I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something. In addition to the Tony Lyons series, you have this great tutorial taught by Victor Perez on FX PhD called The Art and Science of Green Screen Keying. In the first part, it will give you in-depth information about all the keyers that you can find in Nuke. In the second part, it will show you all the techniques you need to know to pull a very good key. As usual, the links will be in the description. Once again, my name is Alex Gaudiano and I will see you in the next class. Thank you very much for watching. Just before leaving you, I would like to give you an information. This course is 100% free and I'm not paid for it. I really made it with the desire to share knowledge with you. But if you like to reward or support the job I've done, you can give me a tip by following the PayPal link in the description. Once again, thank you very much and see you soon.